Hi, I'm Effie and this video is going to be a book haul. I don't tend to do a lot of book hauls. I don't know why, honestly, but the twist, USP, whatever you want to call it, of this book haul is that the vast majority of these books are actually trophy shelf books, i.e. books that I've read and really enjoyed and want a physical copy of. There are a couple of books thrown in here that I haven't read yet, but mostly they're actually books that I've really enjoyed. So I think let's just get stuck straight in. So top of the pile we have got Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a book I read a year or two back, I think, and I felt so seen by this book. Like, you know, my situation is very different from Enchanted, I think that's her name. Yeah, from Enchanted, our lead character. But there was something so affirming about seeing people say, you know, just because this age gap worked for you doesn't mean that it's okay, and that just because something's technically legal doesn't make it okay. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book and I look forward to rereading it in the very near future. I really enjoy Tiffany G. Jackson's writing. Not as big a fan of the horror books, but the contemporary social commentary ones really, I mean, the horror contains social commentary, but I'm just a lot more a fan of Grown, Monday's Not Coming, allegedly. I haven't, have I read? I feel like there's one I haven't read yet. But anyway, very happy to own a copy of Grown now. Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Coppersmith is another book that I read a couple of years back. It takes place in Vietnam and there's multiple timelines going on. It's a little bit weird, it's a little bit creepy. There's some great kind of commentary on the colonization of Vietnam and the lasting impact of what the US and the French and I think other colonists. I'm not very up on my history about that part of the world, but I had an incredible time reading this. I actually bought a copy and fully annotated it for my best friend, and that really added to my experience. And my hope is that when I read this copy, because obviously this is my copy, it's a completely clean copy. I think I didn't even get it secondhand, so I think it's actually new. And I'm hoping that, well, not hoping, because hope implies that I don't have a say in the matter. My intention is to annotate this as I reread it, but also I'm very aware that annotation is a labour of love, so it might be a case of just wanting to devour the story again and then going through and annotating it on a secondary reread. But I mean, this book is so good and I am so glad to have read it and so beyond happy to own a copy for myself now. Under the Oak Tree Volume 1 is one of the handful of books in this video that I actually haven't read yet, but I was looking at the graphic novel of this book I think like a day or two before it came out, and then I realised this was a novelisation because loads of people were posting about it online, and I saw that it's absolutely gorgeous and you can see there's some foiling. The end papers are fairly plain, but yeah, it's just a really gorgeous edition, and the book already appealed to me, and then it kind of appealed to my magpie nature. So hopefully I love this, and if I do, I will be continuing to get the novelizations of this web novel. Web novel. I thought it was originally a graphic novel. I'm not really sure on the history behind it, but I will be continuing to get these editions if I love this book. The Travellers by Regina Porter. This is a really weird one because I remember loving this book, but I couldn't tell you very much about it, apart from the fact that it is a story about a family that spans over many generations, and you can kind of see on the cover there's this little family tree, and it's got like important characters to the story. And I loved the way it told this family story and how everything wove together in a really beautiful way. But beyond that, I can't remember much about it. But I knew that I wanted to own a copy and to get a chance to read it again. The Kindred by Alicia Dow is a book that I read in audiobook format. This was back when Everand was script and when Everand wasn't it was a subscription model, but it was like unlimited for your monthly fee. And this is an author who I think I followed on Twitter. I never was particularly a big Twitter user, but I remember like following her on Twitter and hearing about her like stories that centre Black young women and, you know, just giving them the chance to have the joy and the spotlight. And also I remember she was really into baking. I don't know if she still is. And then I read this book and I was utterly blown away. Like, it's okay, how do I describe it? So basically, in order to kind of create peace, I don't know if that's the right word, yeah, I guess there's like a treaty in place to stop revolution happening. So every time I'm gonna do a really bad job of describing this, but basically every time I think one of the like upper class privileged people is born, they are given a kindred, which is a mind pairing bond, and it's meant to give them an insight into like how the other half lives. And these two characters were never meant to be kindred because like he's royalty and she's like the lowest of the low, and like royalty's meant to be paired off with someone that actually is kind of in the upper echelons. But they became kindred and they were best friends, and then something happens that means they have to flee together and they end up on Earth. And it's this story that's one part mystery, one part fish out of water, one part romance, and it all just merges together into this incredible story that I had the best time reading. Tonally, at the end of everything, could not be further from Kindred. I mean, obviously, like, Kindred is quite a joyful and comforting book, but at the end of everything is dark. So this is by Marieke Nijkamp, and I don't think this author writes, well, I don't know, maybe they do now, but previously their stories were all quite dark. They all had queer characters. I think they also all featured you know, characters with a variety of disabilities and neurospiciness. But this is such a hard-hitting story. So basically it is a pandemic story, and it's told like at the very start of a pandemic, so kind of when things are starting to be locking down, and it focuses on these young people who are in I don't know, is it called a young offenders? A juvenile treatment centre, which is just a fancy way of saying under 18s prison. And basically what happens is at the start of the pandemic, they essentially get forgotten about. They are treated as the lowest of the low priority, and they all have to just kind of take care of themselves. There's no adults around. They have to somehow survive when they've been completely abandoned. This is a harrowing story and really, really hard hitting, but also quite possibly one of my favourite books ever. Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno Garcia is a vampire story, and it takes place in Mexico City. I think, and I could be wrong, but I think there's multiple kinds of vampires in this story. Ooh, there's cocktail recipes in the back. I read this book as an ARC, so I don't think I'd read all of the bonus material, but there's a lot of stuff at the back. No, I can't immediately see, but I think there's a variety of different kinds of vampires in this story, and they're based on different kinds of traditional myth and lore, which, as a massive fan of vampires, absolute nerd for vampires, I loved the fact that this had lots of unique takes on vampirism, and it largely centres around one vampire's relationship with their Renfield. And basically I just really want to reread it because vampires. We've got another book that I haven't read, one of very few, and this is Fraternity by Andy Mintus. The reason I got this is because, and I'm going to pop an image on screen, I absolutely detest the original cover for this book. So when I saw a secondhand paperback for sale, I was like, right, I'm going to get it now. I'm not going to hold off because I actually really quite like this cover. Also, that's gorgeous. I don't remember much about it, so I will read the blurb. It says, "Be careful what you pledge. In the fall of 1991, Zoe Orson transfers to the Blackfriars School for Boys, hoping for a fresh start following a scandal at its last school. But he isn't the only Blackfriars student with something to hide. Zoe is taken in by the Vicious Circle, the school's secret gay club that goes back decades. There he befriends handsome Jock Daniel, flamboyant Leo, and stoic Stephen, and he starts to feel like he belongs, except for the bullies who immediately sniff him out and the constant threat of exposure. But then the boys happen upon the headmaster's copy of an arcane occult text. To protect themselves from a world that seems like it will never accept them, they unleash an eldritch secret so terrible it threatens to consume them all. Set during the still raging AIDS crisis, Fraternity examines a time not so long ago when secret brotherhoods lurked in the shadows and a group of boys learns how far they're willing to go to protect their found family." So the fact it's queer and magical and the word eldritch really appeals to me, and yeah, I'm just looking forward to getting to read this at some point in the hopefully near future. A Cursed Son by Day Later. So I read this earlier in the year, I think, and I had a good time with it. I don't think it was anything super mind-blowing, but also I do love marriage of convenience inconvenience. Basically, the plot of this is that This woman is trained as an assassin and a decoy princess, and then a series of events happen that means she catches the eye of the exiled king, prince of the Fey Kingdom, and he's like, right, I want to marry her. So she gets whisked away, and she's like, oh, let's try and kill him. But obviously they catch feelings quite quickly. So this is the first book, and I think it's going to be a trilogy, and I am excited for the sequel to come out. But the big selling point for me is Under the Dust Jacket. Like, it is a good book. I don't think it was a 5-star for me, but it's a really, like, entertaining book. But, like, look at the artwork under this dust jacket. I am just absolutely blown away. Like, this guy just looks so gorgeous. Like, yeah, this is who you want as your romantic interest. Also, she's gorgeous. Like, I love her purple hair, and that's kind of a plot point of the book as well, is that she has purple hair that she has to hide, and she's trying to hide it from him without seeming, suspicious. Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious. Except, obviously, everything she does is suspicious to him. Okay, the next two books are 0.5 and 1 in a series. Annoyingly, because one of them is indie published and one of them is trad published, even though they're the same series, they're different heights. But we've got Salt in the Wound and Salt Kiss by Sierra Simone. These are the Lioness trilogy, of which we are still waiting on book 3. Book 2 is already on my shelves somewhere because there was a pre-order campaign and I was like, oh, gotta get on that. But, I read Salt Kiss and the sequel as arcs, and this one was like free anyway. The ebook, is free. But I needed physical copies because Sierra Simone is an auto-buy author for me. Like, if she writes it, I'm going to love it. It doesn't matter if the kinks are so far away from things that I normally would enjoy. But these are fantastic. So they take place in a kink club that is featured peripherally in the new Camelot series. And this is a retelling of Tristan and Isolde, but imagined as a poly relationship. And I think that's about all I'm going to say. But there's something about the way Sierra Simone writes that's just absolute catnip to me. Speaking of kinky books, we have Desperate Measures, and this is the deluxe edition, which I really love this edition. I'd read Desperate Measures a good few years ago, and then I saw that these deluxe editions were coming out, so I arc read the deluxe edition, and I just love that there's like, hopefully there's nothing too smutty on this page, but there's like footnotes, and it just adds just an extra dimension to the story. Also, we have a full colour piece of art. If you aren't aware, the Desperate Measures is part of the Wicked Villain series, which reimagines the some famous Disney villains as the romantic interests in the book. So this is Jafar and Jasmine, and it's just utterly delightful, and I look forward to a full reread soon now that I've got this gorgeous edition. It Took Luke by, who is it by? Mark Bouchard, Bailey Underwood, Micah Myers and Jasmine Walls. This is a graphic novel, and it's been a few years since I read it, but basically as soon as I read it I knew I wanted to own a copy of it. But I'll quickly read the blurb for you. It says, down on their luck, exterminator Sal Hernandez is sick of long hours and living in their work van, culling the growing populations of dragons, bugbears, and horrific eldritch monsters. They're ready to quit their job and reconcile with their estranged partner. The only thing standing in their way is one last shift, but what seems like a routine call gets quickly out of hand when a proselytizing mass of flesh abducts Sal's newest co-worker, Luke. With this extermination job turned into a rescue mission, Sal and their teammates, Molly and Hussam, are faced with the horrific creature that waits in the shadows and the incompetence of their boss. It Took Luke explores crunch culture and its casualties through the lens of a disparate existential take on hack and slash horror. This is, I don't know, like, I can't really say anything about it, but I'm pretty sure I remember the ending, and I remember really liking the ending. So I think all I'll say on this is, if you have the chance to read this, I highly, highly recommend it, and I am no doubt going to be rereading this very soon. Deadlocked and Dead Reckoning by Charlene Harris. So a little while ago, my best friend did an unhaul. In fact, I think the last time I did a book haul was me hauling books she'd unhauled me. But she unhauled her Charlene Harris series, and for some reason, the way it was boxed up, I think it only had, I think it was books 1 to 10, and I think there's 13 in the series. And I really want to reread this series. So I was very lucky to get, I think it was book 13 in a free bookshop. So I just needed to get 11 and 12, which I now have. So I'm all set to do a reread soon. And I'm very bad for like sticking to video plans, but what I would like to do is, after I finish my reread of Darren Shan's series, which I promise I do plan on continuing. I just want to do it justice. But I think after I finish that, I might do a reread series of these books, which I can't remember what the series is called, because I want to call them the Sookie Stackhouse series, but I think they're like Southern Murder Mysteries or something. Anyway, yeah, so I finally completed my series. For Real and Pansies are books 3 and 4 in Alexis Hall's Spires series, which has been re-released this year, so there are going to be more books in the series. But with this book, with Pansies, we're now up to date with the Spires series. I hadn't previously read Spires, the Spires books, and I still need to go back and read Glitterland. But I first read Waiting for the Flood, which I don't own physically, but I do own the audiobook, and I fell in love with this series. It's very different from Alexis Hall books that I'd read in the past, because they are spicier, they are harder hitting, and they just hit in a very different way. But in For Real, we are following a 30-something sub who is just a bit beaten down by life, and into his life comes this incredible sunshine 19-year-old who happens to be a dom, and it shouldn't work, but it really, really does work. So obviously there's a lot of BDSM elements to it, as well as Hall examining the way that people view queerness. There's discussions about how bottoming isn't necessarily an act of submission and other things like that. I thought it worked really well that we had all these different interesting power dynamics between the two characters, and there was just something so heartwarming about it. But be aware there are some heavy stuff touched on in this book, and it's almost definitely going to make you cry. It's also going to make you shed happy tears. And then in Pansies, we're following two young men who grow up together, and one of them actually bullied the other when they were in secondary school together. But now they're like 10 years later, and they kind of like fall in love, but they're having to unpack their relationship with the place they grew up and their identity. And whilst the one that was doing the bullying feels comfortable in his identity when he's living in London, when he's back home in South Shields where he grew up, doesn't really feel that way anymore. He kind of reverts back to the South Shields version of him, and it's him coming to terms with these disparate parts of himself, and also, you know, falling in love with the boy. There again are some heavy topics covered in this book, in some ways heavier than For Real. Well, actually definitely heavier than For Real. I would say this is probably the heaviest book in the Spire series, but I think it also might be my favourite. I mean, honestly, they're kind of like neck and neck. I really, really love the Spire series. The Actor and His Secret by Ben Alderson and Laura R. Samerton is a contemporary romance between a book publicist and the actor in one of the film adaptations of the books that the publicist works for. I'm doing such a bad job here. There's, you know, coming to terms with like difficult family dynamics, the way that your exes can mess you up, coming out on your own terms, a whole heap of that. But it's also really sweet, and it's just a fantastic contemporary romance. So apart from the fact I just wanted to own a copy, I knew I was going to an event with Ben Alderson in London in November, so I was like, right, got to get myself a copy. So it's also now signed and dedicated. So, treasured book. Another book that I have not read. There's only one more book that I haven't read after this one. So this one is Now She Is Witch by Kirsty Logan. I think Gloamings was by Kirsty Logan, which is a Selkie story, and I really loved that. And then I've also read Logan's short story collection, and I don't know much about this book, but someone was selling this edition, which is the proof edition, on Vinted, and I just knew that I needed it because it's just absolutely gorgeous. And like the final cover's not bad, but when you can have this edition, you know, I'm gonna go for this one. I'm worried my stack of books is gonna fall over. Hopefully not. Vampire Menstrual Syndrome, the first cycle by S.C. Hunter. This is intended to be a trilogy, and it's really cool. So what they did is they do like a drop to indicate each book in the trilogy. Unfortunately, I don't know when book 2 and subsequently book 3 are coming out, but they did say something cryptic on their TikTok a little while back, basically saying that this edition will be disappearing at some point in the future. So I don't know if we're going to get some exciting news about the rest of this series. But basically, it's equal parts funny and equal parts horror. Vanessa is turned into a vampire on the first day of her period. And it's kind of like, you thought periods were bad. Imagine being a vampire on your period. And she's just absolutely falling to pieces. And each day is getting worse and worse. This is a book that I don't think there are a single straight character in, which we love to see. And it's very, very feminist. I don't know what else to say. Like, vampires, feminist, lots of rage, doesn't take itself too seriously. Oh, also, I arc read this, and like, obviously, I arc read as opposed to beta read. But when the author sent out arc, she was like, you know, feel free to email if you've got any concerns or whatever. And there was a couple of bits of this book that I thought didn't hit quite right. So I emailed the author and they changed it. And I just, like, it's very much a case of, like, only me and the author would know that, like, it was, like, my input that changed it. But, like, that's just so freaking cool. And the last 3 books we've got are Naughty or Nice, which at the time of filming I am currently reading and loving. And then we've also got Legally Binding and False Confidence. And these are all by Sophie Snow. They're all signed and dedicated because I bought them directly from the author. So, Legally Binding is an age gap romance between a lawyer, I think he's a lawyer, and, or maybe not, I'm not sure. I actually can't remember what he does, but it's between him and his assistant. But it's a very, like, thoughtful age gap romance. Like, she's almost 30 and he's twice her age, but, you know, it's very self-aware that there's an age gap, and also she's almost 30, so an age gap is a bit different at that point. And, like, Sophie Snow's books all contain, like, slightly hard-hitting stuff, difficult relationships with family, and they're just, the way she writes is absolutely fantastic. And then False Confidence is, I say sequel, but it's, you know, companion novels in the same series. So False Confidence is the son of the MMC in this book and the best friend of the FMC in this book. But, like, because the MMC in Legally Binding is in his 50s, the son is in his 30s, and the best friend is, I think she's way to turn 30. So, like, there's a bit of an age gap, but it's only like 7 years. And the sort of twist to this is that he's a pleasure dom and she hasn't had an orgasm in, I think, a decade. It doesn't say specifically on the back, but I'm pretty sure it's been a decade since she's had an orgasm. And they're meant to be. I don't know what else to say. I just really enjoy these books. I was going to show you the art print I ordered with, well, actually it was with Naughty or Nice, which is an age gap Santa kink holiday novella. But I think it might be a bit raunchy. So, I don't know. I don't know how to end this. I've sort of backed myself into a corner of, like, rustling. It came with a candy cane and some love hearts. Yeah, I've sort of backed myself into a corner here. But those are all of the books that I have got for my little book haul, and I'm pretty happy with that because I think that's 4 books that I haven't read, but one of them I'm currently reading at the time of filming, and potentially will have finished by the time this video goes up. And then the rest of them are books that I have read and loved and needed to own a copy of. I would love to do more of these videos in the future. Let me know if that's something that's interesting to you. And also, leave me a comment about one book you need to get for your trophy shelves that you keep putting off. Because if you're anything like me, you have a really hard time pulling the trigger. Yeah, I think that's the right turn of phrase. Pulling the trigger on actually buying the books you've read and loved to own physically. So I'd love to know what books are that for you. But I think that's all I've got for today. So until next time, love you. Bye.